She laughed at my dreams. Then I became a millionaire and her boss. The memory of her laughter still rings in my ears, sharp and brittle like breaking glass, even 4 years later. That's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't fade like other emotions. It calcifies, becomes something hard and permanent inside you. I can still feel exactly how the air conditioner chilled the sweat on my neck as I stood in her office. The business plan I'd spent months perfecting clutched in trembling hands while she dismissed everything I'd built with a casual flick of her manicured fingers. "This isn't viable," she had said. Not directly quoted, of course. Just my mind replaying her words over and over in that endless loop that trauma creates. My stomach clenches at the memory, that familiar acid burn crawling up my throat. She hadn't just rejected my loan application. That would have been business, professional. What Victoria did was personal. The way her lips curled at the corners, how her eyes narrowed with amusement before she called in her assistant to see this. The performance she put on, reading portions of my business plan aloud, her voice dripping with mockery while her assistant tittered obediently. I remember walking out of Meridian Bank that day, my vision blurred, not from tears. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction, but from something deeper, a fundamental shift in how I viewed the world. The elevator ride down 18 floors had felt like a descent into some new version of myself. By the time I reached the lobby, with its gleaming marble and self-important people hurrying in their expensive suits, I was someone else entirely. My apartment felt smaller that night, the walls pressing in as I sat at my second-hand desk, the rejection letter placed deliberately in front of me. Her signature, Victoria Kincaid, Vice President of Small Business Lending, was an elegant, flowing thing. I traced it with my finger, imagining her hand moving across the paper, unaware that she was signing a contract of sorts. Not one that bound her to me, but one that bound me to a purpose. I didn't sleep. The digital clock on my microwave blinked 3:47 a.m. when I finally understood what needed to happen. Not revenge. That word seemed too small, too petty for what I envisioned. This would be reconstruction. I would rebuild myself molecule by molecule until I was unrecognizable, until I was someone with power. And then, only then, would Victoria Kincaid understand what she had done. Morning arrived with the flat gray light of early spring. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, but my mind had never been clearer. I showered methodically, the water so hot it left my skin red and tender. Good, I thought. Let this be a baptism. Let me emerge new. I called in sick to my mid-level marketing job. They wouldn't miss me for a day, perhaps not even if I disappeared entirely. That thought didn't sting the way it once might have. Instead, it felt like freedom. If no one was watching, no one would see me transform. The library opened at 9. I was waiting outside at 8:45, a notebook already half filled with ideas spawned during my sleepless night. The elderly librarian smiled as she unlocked the door, unaware she was admitting someone who had died and been reborn in the span of 12 hours. I commandeered a back table near the business section and began my education in earnest. Financial statements, market analysis, investment strategies. The words that had once intimidated me now felt like weapons being forged for my arsenal. Each concept I mastered was another piece of armor protecting me from future victorias. Days turned to weeks. I kept my marketing job, it paid the bills, but every other waking moment was dedicated to my transformation. I built a secondary income through freelance work, saving obsessively. My social life withered and died. I felt nothing at its passing. Friends texted, then called, then eventually stopped reaching out. Their disappearance registered as nothing more than the removal of distractions. The first real opportunity came 3 months later. A startup was looking for a marketing consultant with experience in the financial sector. My background was adjacent enough, and I had spent the intervening months becoming fluent in the language of finance. I worked 18-hour days on their project, delivering a comprehensive strategy that exceeded every expectation. They offered me a permanent position. I negotiated for equity instead of a higher salary. My first intelligent risk, the startup FinEdge, was developing software to help small businesses navigate loan applications. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every line of code felt like a letter and a message meant only for Victoria, though she remained oblivious to my existence. The software streamlined exactly the process she had used to humiliate me. We were making her role less powerful, one algorithm at a time. FinEdge grew. My equity grew with it. I lived like a monk, reinvesting every spare dollar. My apartment remained sparsely furnished, my clothes serviceable but unremarkable. Nothing that would betray the growing number in my investment accounts. Nothing that would hint at my metamorphosis. I kept tabs on Victoria, not in a way that would raise alarms. I wasn't following her home or memorizing her schedule, but LinkedIn updates and industry newsletters kept me informed. She received a promotion, senior vice president. Her smile in the announcement photo hadn't changed. Still that same curl at the corners, that same glint of superiority. The market crashed 18 months into my plan. Financial institutions toppled like dominoes. FinEdge, with its lean operation and valuable intellectual property, survived where bloated competitors failed. We were acquired by a larger tech company for a sum that turned my modest equity into 7 figures overnight. I remember staring at my account balance, feeling nothing at first. Then a slow, spreading warmth. Not happiness, something sharper. Vindication, perhaps. The first taste of it, at least. The acquisition gave me options. I could have retired early, lived comfortably. The thought never crossed my mind. Instead, I leveraged my newfound wealth and position to secure a role at Technovate, a digital transformation consultancy that specialized in financial institutions. Their client list included Meridian Bank. My interview suit cost more than 3 months' rent at my old apartment. The tailor had measured every inch of me, creating something that spoke of success without shouting it. When I looked in the mirror, a stranger looked back. A stranger with my eyes, but harder, colder. Technovate hired me as Director of Strategic Partnerships. My references from the FinEdge acquisition opened doors that would have remained firmly closed to the person I was 4 years ago. I cultivated relationships carefully, positioning myself as indispensable. Each meeting was a performance, each business dinner a stage on which I demonstrated my value. And then, 27 months after Victoria had laughed at my dreams, Meridian Bank signed a contract with Technovate for a complete digital overhaul of their lending division. I made sure I was assigned as the lead. The first meeting was held in the same building where she had humiliated me. Different floor, different room, but the same air conditioning that chilled my neck. This time I didn't sweat. I sat at the head of the conference table, my team arrayed around me like a personal army, and waited. Victoria entered last. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, streaked with premature gray at the temples. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? I was just another consultant in a sea of consultants, another face in an industry full of interchangeable professionals. But I recognized the way she carried herself, the slight tilt of her chin that suggested everyone else in the room should be grateful for her presence. I stood, extended my hand across the table. The meeting room lights caught the edge of my watch, an understated Patek Philippe that cost more than her annual bonus. Her handshake was firm, impersonal. Her eyes slid over me without seeing. "We've met before," I said. Not a question, just a statement of fact dropped into the professional silence of the room. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She was trying to place me, scrolling through her mental Rolodex of people worth remembering. 4 years ago, I continued, my voice betraying nothing of the volcano beneath. You reviewed my business loan application. Recognition dawned, followed immediately by discomfort. Not fear, not yet, but the first inklings that this meeting might veer from the script she had anticipated. I didn't belabor the point. Instead, I turned to the presentation, outlining how Technovate would transform Meridian's outdated systems. Every slide was a testament to efficiency. Every projected outcome, a promise of increased profitability. Victoria remained silent throughout, her earlier confidence visibly diminished. When the meeting concluded, she approached me while the others filed out. Standing close enough that no one else would hear, she offered what I suppose she thought was an apology, an explanation that she had been under pressure back then, that she hadn't meant to be harsh. The words washed over me without penetrating. They were irrelevant. This wasn't about securing an apology, it was about what came next. The project moved forward. I inserted myself into every aspect of Meridian's digital transformation, learning their systems, their hierarchies, their weaknesses. Victoria was one of many weaknesses. Her department's loan approval rates were below industry standard. Her team satisfaction scores ranked near the bottom of internal metrics. She had built her career on perception rather than performance, on looking the part rather than delivering results. I compiled the data methodically, dispassionately, not in a dedicated file that might raise suspicions, but woven throughout legitimate project documentation, evidence that would be discovered naturally as part of our consultation process. 3 months into the project, I requested a private meeting with Meridian's CEO, Roland Whitman, a silver-haired man with old-school banking sensibilities who had nonetheless recognized the need for digital evolution. He approved of my work, of the efficiencies we'd already introduced, The meeting was granted without question. His corner office overlooked the city from the top floor. I could see my old apartment building from his window, a shabby mid-rise now dwarfed by newer development. How fitting that I would stand here, so far above my former life, to set the final phase in motion. I presented my findings clinically. The data told a story of systemic inefficiency centered around the small business lending division, Victoria's division. I recommended restructuring, a new leadership approach. Roland listened, asked pointed questions, took notes in a leather-bound notebook that probably cost more than my first car. "You're suggesting we replace Victoria," he said finally. Not a question. A recognition of what I had carefully avoided stating outright. I maintained professional neutrality while the furnace inside me roared. "I'm suggesting the department needs new direction if Meridian wants to remain competitive in an evolving market." Roland studied me over steepled fingers. "You have someone in mind?" Again, not a question. He hadn't become CEO without the ability to read between lines. I allowed myself a small smile. I believe I could implement the necessary changes. The negotiation that followed was perfunctory. My salary requirements were significant, but justified by my track record. The transition would be announced as a promotion for Victoria, a lateral move into a newly created role with an impressive title, but limited actual authority. Corporate face-saving at its finest. I left Roland's office with a verbal agreement. By the end of the week, I had a signed contract. By the end of the month, I had Victoria's office. I changed everything. The furniture, the artwork, the lighting, erased all physical evidence of her occupation. The only thing I kept was her chair, an ergonomic throne of buttery leather and polished chrome. I wanted to sit where she had sat when she laughed at me. Wanted that symmetry, that completion of the circle. Victoria avoided me after the transition. Understandable, but ultimately futile. Her new role required regular consultation with my department. I scheduled our first one-on-one meeting for exactly 4 years to the day after she had rejected my loan application. She arrived precisely on time, knocking tentatively on the door she used to enter without hesitation. I called for her to come in, watching as she crossed the threshold into territory that was once hers, but now bore my stamp in every corner. "Have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Not her old chair, I was sitting in that one, but a deliberately lower visitor's chair that forced her to look up at me. Nervousness radiated from her in almost visible waves. Her hands fidgeted with the tablet she carried, her eyes darting around the transformed space. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until she felt compelled to fill it. She began with platitudes. How she was adjusting to her new role. How she looked forward to working together. Corporate speak designed to disguise the obvious power shift between us. I let her talk until she ran out of words. Then I opened my desk drawer and removed a single sheet of paper, placing it precisely in the center of the desk between us. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. It was her rejection letter, the one with her flowing signature at the bottom. I had kept it all this time, preserved it like the artifact it was. "Do you know what today is?" I asked, my tone conversational, as if inquiring about the weather. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the letter. 4 years ago today, you laughed at my dreams in this very office. You made a show of rejecting not just my business plan, but me as a person worthy of investment." Color drained from her face. I don't remember it that way." "Of course you don't." I leaned back in her former chair, feeling the contours that had once supported her frame now supporting mine. People rarely remember the cruelty they inflict casually. It costs them nothing to forget, but I remember every second. Her eyes finally lifted from the letter to meet mine. "Is that what this is about? You orchestrated all of this for revenge?" The word sounded small when she said it. "Petty." I smiled, allowing myself to finally feel the full satisfaction of the moment. "This isn't revenge, Victoria. This is consequence. You showed me exactly who you were 4 years ago. I'm simply returning the favor. What are you going to do?" Real fear now, blossoming across her features. I considered her question seriously. The truth was, I hadn't planned beyond this moment. The journey to this office, this chair, this conversation had consumed me so completely that I'd given little thought to what came after. Now, faced with her vulnerability, I found myself at a crossroads I hadn't anticipated. "I'm going to do my job," I said finally. "I'm going to transform this department into something more efficient, more compassionate, and more profitable than it was under your leadership." Confusion replaced fear. She had expected cruelty, had braced for it. My restraint disoriented her more than any threat could have. And you, I continued, you'll do your new job. You'll report to me. You'll contribute value where you can. Or you won't. And the consequences of that choice will unfold naturally, without any special attention from me. She sat very still, processing the anticlimax of our confrontation. I could almost see her reassessing me, recalibrating her understanding of what was happening. "That's it?" she finally asked. "That's your grand revenge?" I smiled genuinely this time. "Victoria, my revenge isn't this conversation. My revenge is succeeding where you said I would fail. My revenge is sitting in your chair, in your former office, as your boss. My revenge is already complete. Everything that happens from this point forward is just business." The realization settled over her like a physical weight. Her shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. I dismissed her with a nod toward the door, turning my attention to the computer screen as if she had already left. A small cruelty, perhaps, but one I allowed myself as the period at the end of this particular sentence. After she left, I sat in the growing darkness of the office as the sun set over the city. 4 years of single-minded focus had brought me to this moment. 4 years of sacrifice, of isolation, of relentless self-improvement fueled by the memory of her laughter. And now that it was done, now that I had achieved what I set out to do, an unexpected emptiness yawned within me. Not regret, I couldn't bring myself to regret any part of the path that had led me here. But a question, what now? The office felt suddenly too quiet, too still. I swiveled in the chair, her chair, my chair, and faced the window. The city was lighting up as darkness fell, thousands of lives unfolding in those illuminated squares, lives with purpose beyond revenge, with connections I had severed in my quest for this moment. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through contacts I hadn't reached out to in years, friends who had tried to stay connected until my silence became too complete to penetrate, family who had given up trying to understand my withdrawal, relationships sacrificed on the altar of this singular purpose. Would any of them recognize me now? Would I recognize myself if I hadn't been so focused on this transformation? I put the phone away without making a call. Those bridges would require more than a casual reconnection attempt. They would demand explanations I wasn't sure I could articulate, even to myself. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting a new initiative for the Small Business Lending Division, a program specifically designed to identify and support entrepreneurs with viable ideas but limited resources. People like I had been, standing nervously in this office with dreams that deserved better than mockery. It wouldn't undo the years of isolation. It wouldn't instantly fill the void left by achieved revenge. But it was a beginning, a different kind of purpose to replace the one that had consumed me for so long. Victoria would continue working under me. Each day a reminder of how completely the tables had turned. But I wouldn't go out of my way to humiliate her as she had humiliated me. That would be returning to the starting point of this circle, becoming what I had despised. Instead, I would simply be better, a better leader, a better judge of potential, a better human than she had been in that moment of casual cruelty. As I worked into the night, the emptiness began to recede, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. She had laughed at my dreams, yes, and I had become a millionaire and her boss. But the real victory wasn't in the reversal of our positions. It was in discovering that I could move beyond revenge into something more meaningful. The last thing I did before leaving the office that night was to take her rejection letter, the paper that had fueled 4 years of transformation, and drop it into the shredder beside my desk. I didn't need it anymore. The reminder had served its purpose, carried me to this point. What happened next would be unburdened by the past, defined instead by the future I chose to create. She laughed at my dreams. Then I became a millionaire and her boss. Now finally I could dream of something new,